at a bad moment. Hey, good afternoon and welcome to East End Community Housing. I'm Michael Daly, and this is Christina DeSanti, my co-host and partner in talking about community housing. This is a show where we bring on interesting people, right, to talk about solutions around community housing. We don't sit here hand-wringing and talk about all the problems we have because we all know them by now. We all see our trade parade, our traffic. We see how hard it is to find teachers, firefighters, healthcare workers, people to work at the bagel stores, employees. So we're here to talk about solutions, right? And we do that at least twice a month. And today we're fortunate enough to have one of my favorite council people on the East End, East Hampton's Cate Rogers. Welcome, Cate. Cate has been a council member for 4 years now, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Previously has been involved in community service for years, working on things, climate justice. You were a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I understand. I was a member of the Southampton Zoning Board for 7 years. So believe me, we could talk about stories on that
We
one.
both have we both want to look at some pain in our lives for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but that was really rewarding work. 10 years on the zoning board. Yeah.
I'm sure it was. It was for me too. My 7 years were terrific and really interesting, but we both moved on to bigger and better things, right? But I'm so glad that you're here to have a conversation with us today. And I wanted to ask you a starting question, and that is, how did, in your view, All Hands on Housing get started, and how have you, as a board, kept it together? It's so impressive to watch your town board meetings, and the work that you do and the work that you've done on this new zoning reformation, on house sizes and things like that. How has the East Hampton Town Board kept All Hands on Housing together for as long as you've done?
I think the easiest way to answer that question is to say that it's our responsibility to react to the challenges that are facing our community. And housing is a crisis. It's not new. The town boards have been looking for effective ways to keep our community, the backbone of our community, our teachers, folks that you've listed, our employees, our families together. So that generation after generation can grow up here and people can age in place here with the support of their families. That's becoming an issue that came to the forefront of boards years ago and has only increased as time has gone on. So I say how we handle and how we stay committed to All Hands on Housing is because it's our responsibility to do so.
But you're actually doing it. I mean, you've created, along with the housing authority, quite a number of units over the last several years. You already had a decent base of units at St. Michael's and some of the other communities you have, but you're continuing to move forward. You're changing zoning on things like ADUs, and none of the other townships seem to be able to get that accomplished. What's the difference in East Hampton? I mean, if you go to other town board meetings, there's loud and angry people who are kind of just coming and assaulting the town board members, and they're just paralyzed. Why is it different in East
So
Hampton?
I think one of the things that makes it different for us is that we're geographically isolated. So you can't turn around and say, well, people can live one town over where it's less expensive and be able to still work here. We're at the end of a landmass. We're it. So we have to be self-reliant in as many ways that we can be. And that's coastal resiliency. That's with everything. But that's also with how we develop our ideas for our own community housing. When the need appears and it's becomes so apparent here, as I don't know how the other municipalities, I can't speak for them and what their challenges are, but our challenges are the loss of our year-round local community.
Sure.
And that is essential for not only being who we are in East Hampton, but to have enough folks to be able to man the town. And that's from the fire departments to the police departments to the schools, through all the services, and we see it every day in every department in town government. And with that inability to house our own employees here in town, then we see the compounding of issues like with traffic.
Yeah.
So now the trade parade and the time that the seasonality of the longer commute
boy, yeah.
is
Right.
year-round. It's non-existent that it's seasonal. It's year-round, and we have a difference in ideology of folks. The commute is much longer, and younger people, they don't want to be what my parents moved out from Brooklyn to Long Island to have a little bit of more room, but they were very used to making that commute. We have
Right, we're
because
finding that with the teachers, the younger ones, they don't want to commute.
and I think they have a better idea of life balance. I
Right,
think
they
it's
do.
true. I mean, who wants to sit in traffic for
Right.
an hour to 2 hours a day each way?
Right.
So we see employees for all businesses and in the town, they get here at 5 a.m. and sit in one of the parking lots
Right.
Sure.
and then wait to come into work.
Right.
We have to adjust to what we have, not what we had.
Right.
We can't stop change, but we have to be able to manage change. And I think because we're geographically isolated and a small community, we see these needs more pressing than perhaps in other areas, which are more spread out.
I think it's more glaringly obvious to the community now, whereas Southampton, you can have somebody that, can commute from further, but like you're saying, from here, there is no commuting. So I think that the community too, when we first started talking about affordable housing years ago, everyone was against, here and there and lots of different excuses and for why not to do it. And I think I've noticed in the last, particularly like maybe last 2 years, that the community is really starting to understand that
get it.
it's not going to be perfect, but it's a need and we have to do it and we're going to have to overlook certain things to get it done because it is an emergency now.
So I think also that the idea is that there's the community that don't need to look at a housing affordability, but that's not true here. It's
Right.
the community itself is what's being impacted.
Right.
So I think the understanding is there. I remember the first housing opportunities, community housing opportunities that I got involved with just by moving to a particular area was for Green Hollow. And the way that project evolved with the neighbors' input, listening to what folks are most concerned about, you find out that there's so much commonality more than people objecting. And when you put those concerns to rest by implementing maybe a 50-foot tree line, minimal clearing, pollinator gardens, and take all of the community's concern into consideration, we do what we're in the business to do. We solve the problems.
Right.
You've also been able to create almost a menu of options because it's not one size fits all. So there are apartments for renting. There are single-family homes for people who want to buy them. The ADUs. I know you've moved into looking at rent subsidies, which was a little bit of a newer initiative, and down payment assistance. So East Hampton really is sort of hitting, every sort of aspect of it, and I think you're finally getting some movement on some of it. And I
Cantwell
don't.
Court, for instance,
Yeah.
is going to be a terrific, I drove in through there just a couple weeks ago. It's going to be a terrific development.
So
And those
Christine,
will
you're
be
absolutely right.
single-family.
There's not one size fits all, one
Right.
idea fits all. We have to throw out all the options that are possibly available to us. And we also have partner support from the state and the county and these grant opportunities that exist for us that we are always looking for to be able to take advantage of. So as those opportunities open up, so do our options for housing. So with the plus one ADUs programs and grants available for people to be able to create spaces for either family members or local people with a rent cap. And We also, to ensure, and I think this is one of the reasons why we've gotten so much community support, is that we ensure that we have guardrails in place so that the opportunities can't turn into abuses.
Right.
And the people that need the housing get the housing.
Right, there will be
I'm
no renting it out to Airbnb. It's got to
Well,
be a
yes,
local,
and
year-round.
you bring up Airbnb, but what's happened with the proliferation of short-term rental in our communities, which to me is the commercialization of our residential districts,
Right.
that has had a very negative impact on
Right.
affordability in our town, and something that
Absolutely. In my years here, we used to, there were a lot of local families that would, if you had somewhere to go during the summer, you would leave and you would rent your house. But now, when you have people who had a house that was open year-round, okay, so you would rent it to a local family. And now, then it became like, okay, so then you just rented it for the long summer season and you left it vacant. And now it's like, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, or a week, a weekend.
Turned into like
And-
boutique hotels.
Yes, and it
Exactly.
really, I think, personally, I've been here a long time, that I think was one of the really big changes to getting us to where we are now. And I would like
But
to
the
see.
town has some zoning and regulations around that, but enforcement is
enforcement, right.
challenging, right?
Enforcement's always challenging. I say to people sometimes we would need one code enforcement officer per street
Yeah.
to be able to deal with everything. I mean, look at how we're different from a community that doesn't have a tourist season,
Right.
right? So we also, again, we have to meet the needs of our particular community. And the tourist season is very important to our community, on the one hand, but also on the other hand, we have to ensure that the ability to make large amounts of money on internet from international corporations doesn't take over the model
Right.
of your local family
Right.
staying on a little boat or with relatives to help pay their mortgages. That's why we have the rental registry laws, and that's why the summer rentals are allowed, because
But
traditionally.
we balanced all of that before we were allowing 2-week rentals.
Exactly. So
And we have plenty of business, okay? I spent a lot of years in catering, and there's only so many events that I can do on a Saturday in the summer. So when we hit that tipping point where there is just too much, the 2-week rentals turning over and turning over and turning over, that has had, a regular.
A tough effect. I
yeah.
have friends and know people in Montauk who've just given up and left. I mean, we all do, right? Because, oh yeah, I lost my rental because this guy turned it into an Airbnb. And it's, but there's software out there. I know the county is now using Granicus, right? I'm not sure if the town is using that kind of software yet in order to identify and to pull from the internet.
So we're seeing a proliferation instead of a reduction in the type of short-term rental platforms. We're seeing platforms that promise to not only market your existing house, but let you know how to maximize
I know, isn't it
your
crazy,
income.
the stuff
They
that's
call it
coming
the
out?
hotelification of your home.
Yeah.
Which is not the intent of our we want residential neighborhoods where people can get some help with their mortgages, as the tradition of East Hampton has been forever, but also where you can raise families and you're not looking to maximize an investment.
Right.
And then you see the proliferation of people, one group owning multiple houses
That's right.
throughout the community. And all of this now is putting stress on our affordability. So when I did this suite of zoning changes for our lot sizes, for what you're allowed to do on lots, how far down you're allowed to dig, when I really started to dig into what was going on here and why houses needed to be so big with so many bedrooms, and you then look at the rental platform saying maximize, you have to have
Right.
10 guests a
Right.
week, you have to
Square
have this.
footage,
Then now
Right.
as we do with everything else, we're gonna look for solutions to that issue now. Next.
Aspen actually had an interesting solution too, because we're not the only resort community that is being inundated with 2-week rentals that are forcing, local families to not be able to rent there. And Aspen, I think it was, actually started subsidizing the landlords to put things back on the market year-round, to pull them off of the summer rental list. And
Lease to
they were
locals.
subsidizing the landlords so that the landlord was still being made whole with what they could have, rented it for, but then they were renting it to a local family for a lesser amount that the local family could afford, and the town was subsidizing the difference. And I think that's where, like, the next step of maybe creative solutions that I know.
We're gonna put every solution on the
Yeah.
table,
You have to.
and look at every single option that we possibly can. One of our differences from Aspen is Aspen's very seasonal because it's with the snow, where we're now becoming a year-round vacation destination, which again, is not something we wanna stop, right? But we want our commercial districts to handle our commercial business, so we have tons of hotels, bed and breakfasts.
Right.
But when it starts to, you said a very important term before that we've used for climate reality and everything else, tipping points. When we see that we're going, when the development and the exercise of the right to have your short-term rentals is tipping too far in one direction,
Right.
then we have to act. And that's what we're looking at now as a suite of solutions. We can't build enough affordable housing. And I was talking to Katie Casey, and, we're between the windmill villages and the housing authority and the community housing, we have over 5,000 applicants on
That's right.
local families looking for housing, people who want to work, raise a family, and live here.
Right.
And as a community, our primary responsibility always has to be to the people that want to live, raise children, work here, develop businesses here, work in the businesses here. So again, that's our next phase of all the options. I mean, New York City completely banned them, and then other municipalities have different types of regulations. So everything is on the table right now.
Excuse me a second. I just wanted to say, reintroduce ourselves. I'm Michael Daly. This is Christina DeSanti. We're here today with Councilmember Cate Rogers on East End Community Housing, talking about a myriad of issues. And I think we'll wish that we had had an hour for this show.
I know, we definitely need an hour because we already only have 10
We could
minutes.
do a part two.
You mentioned, well, let's do part two, in a couple of weeks. You mentioned, Kate, the zoning changes that I've been watching you, and you were the leader of this, and you were kind of almost the nerd on.
I think I am the nerd.
Yeah, well,
take
but
it.
in a good way, right? Because you dug down deep, and your years on the zoning board helped with that. But you really sliced and diced and stood firm in the face of a lot of opposition from people, builders and developers and some people who were listening to myths, and you helped myth bust during those hearings. So tell us how that came about and what you're most pleased with in terms of the new zoning code to restrict house sizes that had just been getting out of control over in recent years.
Actually, I'd like to know what impact that has on affordable housing. Does it have a positive impact on affordable housing? Because I'll be honest, I'm not in favor of that legislation.
Okay, well, Kate said it a little bit earlier when I'll let you answer it again. But
'cause
the fact that when houses get so out of control, little houses don't matter anymore and they become more valuable because people can monetize them more easily.
It's
and
even
for
the
more
words
money.
that we've come to use, like big and little, where a 2,500 square foot house is now considered too small to raise a family in as an impetus to why we need 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot houses.
Not too small for me.
Yeah, so I mean, this whole idea of what's big and what's small is terms that are so relative to people. I mean, we've had some people come up and say, there's no way people can exist in a 2,200 square foot house.
Oh, come on.
But the other idea is we actually don't count all of the structure when we're talking about house size. We don't count basements at all. And the word basement, I grew up with the basement. I got to paint the walls whatever color I wanted to, and they threw a rug down, and there was a pool table. That was a basement. The washer dryer was down there. Nobody put their washer dryer, and God forbid there was a flood.
Right.
And your utilities were down there. But now that's not what we were seeing developing in the town. We were seeing fully finished lower levels with high-end finishes, and we have a 3-story code, and I kept seeing houses that were clearly 3 stories out of the ground. So I started to ask, if we're only allowed to have a certain house size on a property, how are these houses being built? How are they being advertised at 8,000 square foot when you're only allowed a 6,000 square foot house? Well, everyone's charging by the square foot for what's built, but we don't count everything that's built. So we first looked at closing the loopholes in the code that allowed people to go way beyond what was allowed because those parts of the structure weren't counted.
Right.
We had suggested using basements, but then we heard from local families that this is the cheapest way to build, is to go underground. So we took that
I have a
out.
family of 4 in a 2,400 square foot house. They're all moving on now, but, and we finished our basement.
So
and
we
it's-
took that part out because
was critical.
the idea was not to impact the local families on
Right.
any of and it's not, when I say local families, we all have different terms for
We do, yeah.
a group of people
Yeah.
some people say the small guy, and I don't know what that means either, and we say local families. But it's people who want to live and raise children in our neighborhoods.
Right.
And be part of our community, working in businesses, creating businesses. It's kind of an undefinable term, but we knew what it
Home
wasn't.
offices are a big thing.
And
for
it
your
wasn't
basement.
strictly what we call speculative building, where you
Right.
are, the intent from when you first purchase a vacant property or redevelop a property is to maximize your investment at the end of the line. That reached a tipping point, which also greatly impacted housing affordability. The bigger the house, the more square footage, the more you can charge.
Right.
So now we're seeing half-acre lots with, I mean, is there, I look constantly, and I'm not sure right now what there is below $1 million in this town.
Nothing.
And the curve of,
little.
with the impact of COVID and then the speculative development,
Yeah.
because land here is so valuable because it's limited. And in the past, people have fought against the tipping points and the balance of development
Right.
here in town. I'm standing on a lot of people's shoulders, from the 80s. Judith Hope is a big mentor of mine.
Right.
And she stood up at that time, and what they were developing at that time was subdivisions, because there were large tracts of developable land.
Right.
We don't have that anymore. So what we have to address is the redevelopment of properties. And being mostly a small lot town in reality, versus the idea of when people think rural, they think 10 acres, is common. But we're basically a town of an acre and less, mostly half acres. And
Yeah, the larger tracts have been preserved.
they've been preserved, exactly. And
Or developed.
or developed.
Or developed, yes.
And now we're looking at what's happening with the redevelopment. And you see, if you look at aerials and you see what's happened to the community character, when you have what was traditionally a modest size house by today's standards, which is 2,500 and below.
Sure.
And now, or 2,800 and below, and now you're looking at things that have to be at least 4,000
4,000
square
square
foot
feet, yeah.
to maximize development. It's too much. We can't handle it, and it greatly impacts not only our natural resources, which we see issues with, but also our community housing. And there's really not sense to me to preserve natural resources when you're not preserving the community. So
Well,
that
and
was
every
part
one
of
of
the
those-
reasons
Every
that
one
we
of those
developed.
big houses also require more human infrastructure to maintain, to care for, to repair. So, there's one town, I can't remember where it is, but they're charging fees by the square foot for how big of a house you build, because they know you're gonna need to have plumbers, electricians, landscapers,
Energy use,
energy
water
use,
use,
all of that.
solid waste management.
Coming, and who's gonna take care of it if you replace a house that local people used to live in, workers, and you put a 4,000 square foot on it, and those people who live there don't have any place to live now, and it happens time and time, and it gets repeated and repeated.
And where I got started with this is just hearing members of our community, one of the lovely things about our town is that when you do run for office, or I was involved with a lot of community town committees before I ran for office, you're out in the community and you're hearing what people say, because we're a small community. You're standing outside of the IGA and you're talking to people, and people in every hamlet kept saying, I don't even recognize my neighborhood. I don't know what's happening. I can't afford to live here. My kids can't afford to live here. We're going to be moving. We're moving out. We're moving out. And then when you looked at the profit structure of that first sale from the local family to the flip, it wasn't those families that were making out
Right.
the best. So, I mean,
Although
everything
we're
is
all
a balance.
cogs in the wheel in a lot of local families, as everyone cashes out, I like to remind everyone that we are all cashing out at the highest amount. So we all have a part to play,
We do.
you know?
We do, but I don't think the
Yeah.
South, I did so much research on the connection between, full connection between house size and reducing it by 15%.
Right.
So we didn't take away house size, we reduced it by an average of 15%. And
But how does that put more housing on the table for year-round families, which I think is the key? We need to put more housing that is year-round and affordable for anyone making under $200,000, which is crazy at this
even
point.
$200,000.
I know,
You
but I
know,
think
two
that,
salaries.
that, for me, as a local person and a local business owner and a local parent, that's what I'd like to see. How do we get more year-round housing that, where someone that can only afford $3,000 a month in rent, and I have friends that cannot find a rental for $3,000 because they're all $5,000 and $6,000.
So one of the ways that I don't know, you know, I constantly look at how much houses rent for a month. And one of the ways that we bring back the balance is to reduce the speculative development, because that's become, every property now is a high-end commodity. Local.
I do see your point in that.
Yeah,
I
so
think
I mean, we have to.
it all has a
We
part.
have to pull that back to
Right.
make.
It takes a little
to
of the
make it a balance.
incentive away to
Right.
abuse.
Maximize.
Right.
Maximize and abuse.
So when
But
we
so
talk
does
about.
banning short-term rentals.
And so that is another issue that
Right.
we have to dive into.
Yeah.
there's
But you
so
know, I'm a
many things.
research, I dive deep, as you said
Okay.
before, and it was 22 months working on the zoning codes.
Yeah.
Right.
And as I explained to folks, when I first, so I kept saying, if you can only build a 6,000 square foot house, how come this house is selling for 8,000 square foot? And I realized
hear that a lot,
that
too.
we had loopholes in our code that allowed this to happen.
Right.
So we didn't have a code on digging out. You could re-excavate your entire property because we never had that issue before.
Right.
You know, a code is a living thing, and you have to adjust it to what's happening at the moment. And one of the things that you find out in my job and in working in climate justice is that there's no silos. It's not just, well, if I do build more affordable housing, I'm gonna fix that problem.
Right.
You have to really have the global look at the traffic issues, the water
Right.
issues, and the community housing issues, and you have to try to do the best you can to manage, right, the changes.
The larger picture, the expanded menu.
Right, I mean, I had
One size does
local
not fit all, right?
young family builders, small builders that weren't part of a giant building that said, we don't get these jobs.
Right.
Kate, we gotta stop. We're running out of time and we could go for another half an hour.
Yeah,
so-
we
I could go
Easily.
forever.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I apologize.
Don't apologize. Let's do a part two.
Yes, let's do a part two. Good conversation.
Soon, in a couple of weeks or in a month or so, all right?
Yes, thank you so much.
We really appreciated having you. Yeah, part two definitely needs to come.
Yeah, we didn't even get to half
Kate
of what we
Rogers,
could have talked
everybody.
about.
Yeah, we didn't even get to half of what we had. Thanks so much,
Thank you
LTV,
so
Thank
much.
you for your
having
forward
us,
vision.
Everyone. Thank
hosting
you.
us. We appreciate it.